Let me start by saying good evening and welcome to Widget & Co. I'm their CEO. My name is still Oliver Sanders, but I want to first of all congratulate you all, because out of the 2,184 applications we received for the jobs, you're down to the last 29, and they're in this room today. Look around. You are the successful candidates on the shortlist. And I'm very excited to present this assessment centre for you today, and I'm looking forward to working with you all day. As you can see, this is going to be quite an arduous affair, because we're not going to stop until 5:30 in the evening, and we've only got a short break at lunchtime. During that time, you'll have the opportunity to have individual assessments. There'll be group assessments, and some of the time is going to be quite challenging, because you're going to have to listen to where you are, because we're going to be asking you to divide into two groups, and one group will do their technical assessment, and the other one will do their in-tray exercise. And you've got to make sure you're at the right place at the right time. It is your responsibility to be there. Now, throughout this entire day, our job is to look for the qualities and the behaviours that we want in our company. And it's your job to make sure that you show them. So I'm expecting 100% commitment. We, in turn, are going to put our full commitment into this, and I'll tell you how we've done that in Widget & Co. I have dedicated a lot of my time and my manager's time to becoming your assessors for the day. They've been qualified, they've been trained, and they've given up their work of today to make sure they're with you. If you look around the room, you'll see many of them here with you. We've invested in video equipment and operations and technology. Every session will be video. That's another expense. And finally, for the role play exercises, we've actually got some actors to make it more realistic. That's the commitment we're putting in. And I'm looking forward to you reciprocating that with 110% of your energy. Now, at lunchtime, I've actually asked more colleagues to come downstairs and work with us and eat with you at lunchtime and give you the opportunity to chat to them. This is not an idle chat. You will, of course, have an opportunity to ask them questions, but you should have something else in your mind, because our commitment is not only assessing you to see if you're right for us, but it's your job to make sure that you are right, reciprocally the other way around. So find out whether you are the right person for this company as well, and whether it fits. Now, I have briefed all my staff that they must take every opportunity to remember who they spoke to, and they will be taking notes of who they spoke to and what they said. And this is my final advice for you. Now, I know what you're saying. We all came by tube. We saw this advert and it's wrong. No, this is my version. This is indeed a play on the British Transport Police's advert, but this is what I'm saying to you. Our job is to encourage you to demonstrate skills we want to see in the job description. Your job is to make sure we see them. Because if you don't show them and you don't say them, we can't see them and we can't score them positively. And we absolutely want to see them. So please, do remember that that's your job, and we will be looking at those throughout the day, all day. And we've already started, so it won't surprise you that your assessment centre started just 5 minutes ago. And with that, my little role play is over, and I can break my character and to say I'm very pleased to give you that insight into what an assessment centre is probably like. Because that's the typical introduction you're likely to get. And if you don't know what an assessment centre is like because you haven't yet been to one, then my job is to play on that agenda and then take you through some more information that you can take away with you. Fortunately, Eric's already introduced me, so I don't have to do that. But in the next 10 minutes, I want to leave you with 4 key takeaways. I want to give you an overview of some of the assessment activities that you might be encountering and give you just a quick thumbnail sketch of each one of those. I want to give you some tips that you might want to do to impress people when you're in some of those activities, and indeed some traps you should definitely avoid. And then finally, a few words about what happens when you leave that room. At 5:30 you leave, the assessors don't. And you'll be getting a pack of these slides. They're available on the resource website. And there's a couple of hyperlinks there, too, which I would recommend if you were interested to certainly follow up and read. The first one there, the Assessment Day Limited, I know it's dated in 2011, seems a long time ago, but actually it's a really good overview and quite readable about the types of activities and gives some great advice. For those who are a little bit more nerdy and really want to understand how assessment centres work, and believe it or not, there is an international standard on assessment centres. This document by the British Psychological Society gives you that insight, and it does talk a lot about the scoring methods, so in case you're interested. So, let's kick off with the first of those 4 things. 7 different assessment centre exercises you might come across. And for each one, I'm going to sort of summarise what it is, and then also say what the assessor will be looking for. The first one is the group exercise. I know you've all seen The Apprentice. It's roughly the same sort of thing. It's a group exercise where they're going to be asking you to undertake a task or solve a problem. You will be given briefings, and you will therefore you'll be assessed on how you work as a team and whether you indeed solve the problem and demonstrate the behaviours that they are looking for. The second item is the situational judgment task. And what they're going to be doing here is giving you a paragraph of a situation, a typical work-related paragraph. I'll ask you to read it, and they'll give you a multiple choice of your responses to them. And you'll be asked to probably make your most favoured choice and your least favoured choice. And simply what they're looking for in that case is whether your responses match their preferred, to see whether you have the behaviours and the skills they're looking for. The third item is the E-tray exercise, named after the famous in-tray, which we all used to have when I was working younger. In-trays on people's desks. You'll be given an inbox probably of emails. And they'll ask to go through those emails and react accordingly. And they're looking for how you are going to prioritise and how you work methodically through those or not. Be aware, there's often one at the bottom which is marked urgent, not surprisingly. The next one is case studies. So a case study I'm sure many of you have come across in your university life. There'll be a lot of qualitative and quantitative data in different forms and formats. And what they're looking for is for you to summarise this, to analyse it and present it back to people. The next one is the informal event. It might take the form of a lunch, a drink, and maybe an office tour. And what they're looking for here is to see how you react and network with people, how you carry yourself professionally, and to see whether you're really interested in the company in the first place. The penultimate one is a presentation, usually two flavours. Is it going to be something you've prepared in advance or something they give you on spec? But either way, they're actually looking for the way you present your material and the way that you engage with the audience. And the final one is, of course, the stalwart, the one-to-one interview. And again, they're going to come across largely two types of questions, something we call the competency-based question and often the strength-based question. So the competency-based question will often be the things they're looking for in their employees, and they'll start with the line, tell me a time when you demonstrated such a skill, and you'll tell us an event of that particular skill. And they'll ask questions about it. Now, given you're going for graduate roles, they're not expecting long career histories, and it might not be their favoured approach. They might try the strength-based questions, which you will definitely be able to draw on your answers. And so these are things like, what achievement are you particularly proud of? And when was the last time you learned something new? So a slightly different question. So let me get to my second area, and just to give you some tips on how you can impress. Now, I'd love to tell you each one of those 7 activities, and unfortunately, we won't have time. What I can do is go through just the group exercise, and here's my points about those. So, as you can imagine, you're often given all in the group the same brief, and you read it and you work accordingly. Sometimes you might be given a slightly different brief. Someone's asked to be the financial person or the marketing person, and you adopt slightly different personas. Either way, you're all trying to answer the problem. The main thing here is to see everybody else as your collaborator and not your competition. There are no marks for answering or speaking first. You will get the most marks for making good points. So the main message here is make points throughout the presentation and make sure they're good. You also get some marks for teamwork, but probably not as many as having good points. So I would definitely encourage the former, not the latter. Now, just in how you work with your other candidates, a good way is to show some professionalism and courtesy to everyone else. Learn their names. So when you're working in that small group, refer to them by name. And if you don't have badges on, then when you're in the breaks, speak to them and ask them what their name is. So during these exercises, if you treat these people like your future colleagues and less like competition, then you're more likely to get the kind of behaviour and interaction that people are looking for. If you can encourage people to speak who haven't yet spoken and bring them into conversation, that'll be a great sign of your collaboration. If you can listen to others and build on their ideas, so much the better. So for example, you might say, I've heard what Simon says, it's very interesting, but let me take that idea and build on it. So you're acknowledging what they've said and you're going further. I'm sure you can imagine other different ways of doing that. There's another angle to this, and that's to be a conversation shaper. So here's a few ideas for you. You could ask lots of open questions, ones you can't answer yes or no to. So how would you do that? Why would you do that? And you can help shape the conversation that way. Maybe if there's a discussion going on, you can help summarise the points that are made so far. So you give some direction to it. So let's move on to the next item. Maybe you can confirm the decisions that have already been made. Maybe you can offer to take notes, and sometimes just timekeep. But my personal favourite is to hold the magic marker that uses on the whiteboard and write. Because once you're by that whiteboard and you've got the pen, you are controlling the group. You can encourage people to speak, you can take the notes, you can direct it, and you can actually facilitate quite well. So if you do get an opportunity, you've got me my job in my assessment centre. So the main message I want to leave you with is collaboration and not competition. So let's try the third area I want to leave you with, which is tips to avoid, traps to avoid. And I'm going to pick on the unprepared presentation. I could have picked any one of the other 7, but we unfortunately are going to make not enough time. So the first thing is reliance on technology. When you're making a presentation, there might be a great temptation to show your PowerPoint skills. Rarely is that's what they're looking for. So if you're doing an on-spec presentation, you won't have time. But if you do have time, it's not going to help. They're after content. So let's make sure you keep your messaging simple and your flip chart reliance high, because that's definitely the way to go. The other idea is, are you going to write out beautiful notes? Probably not, because if you end up with beautiful notes, you'll be tempted to read them. And I want to see a presenter making eye contact with people. I want to see them talking naturally and fluently. So, write out keywords, learn it, rehearse it, practice it in front of a mirror. Trust me, I did this before I came here, and you'll come across a lot more naturally engaged. The third one is not to be too overcomplicated. If you remember that old Ron Seal advert, it does what it says on the tin. Make sure your presentation has some key messages and delivers just those. The chances are it's only going to be 3 or 4 minutes, so you want 3 or 4 points, 3 or 4 slides, job's done. And therefore my last point is avoid too many words, too many slides, and too many pointless graphics. Just keep it simple. So what happens when you leave the room? So as I said in my opening run through of the agenda, probably will end at 5:30. You'll go home having had quite an exhausting day. The assessors are usually just starting the hard work. I've been in wash-up sessions which last about 9, 10 o'clock at night. Now, let's just think about what happens here. So when you're in an assessment, you'll have an observer in the room and they will be scoring you live. What are they doing? They're observing your behaviour and then they're recording it directly onto some sort of grid or evaluation sheet. They might well take verbatim quotes. They might well just score what they see, 1 to 5, and they might have some guidance on what's a 1 and what's a 5. At the end of that, there'll be some subtotaling, some mechanical mechanism to drive a score. That's all very well. Now, in the wash-up and the plenary sessions I've been in, when we've done that, we normally take the highest scores and say, you know what, we don't have to discuss them, they're probably fine. Then we have the people who are not quite at the high level, and we want to have a discussion. And from that discussion, we will bring all sorts of extraneous comments and perceptions we brought in. Someone may have met them at lunch. Someone might have heard them ask a question. All becomes relevant, and that's what you have to be aware of. The decision-making process, numerical, that's easy. It's the discussion you want to make sure you stood out during that day, because that is going to be very relevant. The other thing to bear in mind is when the weightings come across, the practical exercises tend to be weighted heavier than the one-to-one interview. With a one-to-one interview, especially when you're talking about strengths or competencies, it's much easier to detect what people's true behaviours are likely to be like. I recently did a mock interview for someone and he admitted in the debrief that he made up every single example. None of it was true. It was pretty obvious, but it doesn't matter. It's much harder to maintain a persona when you're doing a group exercise, and therefore it's weighted heavier. So, the final thing I want to mention on this slide is the next step letters. As you can imagine, there's going to be a finite number of places. So those people who have got the highest scores or the definites, they will get their first round of letters. And you'll find that they will go out very quickly afterwards, and then there'll be a pause, whereby they will wait and see how many people there accept or reject before taking a second batch. And the reason I wanted to explain that is, in case you are worried after the first week you haven't heard, don't worry, not everything is lost yet. You might find they're just waiting for the second batch. Actually, they may not be that efficient. They might have sent out the first batch, but there's probably two different timings for sending things out. And that canters through my 4 points. My final point to you all is it's all about the skills. The job description that you will receive as part of the pack will be full of the behaviours and the competence they're looking for. That is your clue. That's what they want to see. So make sure you do indeed show it and say it. Thank you very much indeed, and I wish you the very best of luck with your assessment centres.